sing
Should I
when you
do a
and then
test? And
it sounds like it's working.
yeah.
This one on?
So I'm just singing, and then
Yep.
I'm going right. Coming back
Stay,
forward.
stick around for 1 second.
Okay.
Sing with us. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and welcome to our Olim Siyyum at Malkhut. That's a whole lot of Hebrew words, which I will unpack for you in a moment. I'm Rabbi Rachel Goldenberg, the founder and rabbi of Malkhut. It's really wonderful to have you all here to celebrate with our Olim, our 7th and 8th graders who are becoming young adults in the Jewish community, and this is one of those steps in that direction. Joining me right now is our student, Rabbi Emily Herzlin, who has been working with a number of these students as well. So wonderful to be able to start this off with you. You can have a seat, and I'll keep talking. All right. So I want to open this afternoon with some orientation to help everyone here understand what we're doing today and orient you all to the journey that our Olim students have taken to get to this moment. And before I do that, just one housekeeping note. If everyone could please turn off cell phones, that would be great. We don't want to be interrupted. And we're creating some sacred space and time together today for study and learning. Thank you. So what is a siyum? A siyum, the word siyum comes from the Hebrew root to culminate. And traditionally, it is a celebration of concluding a course of study. Often, a siyum celebrates the completion of studying the entire Talmud or some other large body of traditional Jewish text. There are siyumim that occur even in football stadiums with tens of thousands of people. This is our little siyum here today, and it's a culmination of a 2-year-long trajectory of study for our Olim. And they've been studying for many years before that as well, but specifically as our Olim, this word Olim comes from the root to go up, la'alot, you make aliyah, you go up to the Torah traditionally, right, in Judaism. And these students, as they come of age, are now responsible adults and can be honored with that honor of coming up to the Torah. They are Olim, those who go up. So this is a culmination of that 2-year Olim program that we have here at Malkhut. For the first half of our program this afternoon, the students will be sharing their interpretations of the section of the Torah portion that was assigned to them. They are all sharing one Torah portion, which I'm going to give you a little introduction to in a moment. And they each get an aliyah, right? They each get a section that they go up to the Torah to chant. That will be happening next Shabbat. And they are each going to speak today about that section that they are chanting next week. The second half of our program will be more devoted to the social justice work that these students have been doing over the past 2 years. They'll share about their individual mitzvah projects and their group experience of learning about and advocating on social justice issues. So that's what we have in store. And then, of course, cookies, the most important part. Okay. Just a bit of the rationale. We do a group B'nai Mitzvah, a group B Mitzvah experience here at Malkhut. And because there are 6 students in this group, they can share a Shabbat service quite beautifully together. But if we were to add each of these presentations that we're doing today to the service we're doing next week, that service would take like 4 hours or 5 hours, which we don't want. So that's why we split these 2 pieces. In a more typical American bar or bat mitzvah, you hear these kinds of presentations, you hear the Devar Torah, the teaching about the Torah portion, as part of that Shabbat morning service that the student is leading. So just a bit of teaching from me before the students get to teach you a bit. The Torah portion for next week, which is this group's Torah portion, is called Parashat Kedoshim. It comes from the 3rd book of the Torah, the book of Leviticus, which is mostly a handbook for the ancient Israelite priests. It has lots of ritual laws related to the sacrificial system, but this Torah portion, Kedoshim, focuses on a different kind of theme within that. So Kedoshim, Kedusha, those all come from the same Hebrew root of Kuf Daled Shin, which stands for holiness, or the holy, okay? So Kedusha is holiness. Kedoshim is the name of the Torah portion. It gets its name from the first verse of that Torah portion, which Jonathan Wolpert will be chanting next week. Kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. You can see that root happens twice in that first verse. And this means you shall be holy. Kedoshim tihiyu, for I, Yud He Vav He, God's name, right? I, God, am holy. So this Torah portion does still talk about some sacrifices. There are some ritual laws, but it also introduces many laws that are really about how do you live a holy life. And there's a lot of focus on ethical laws about relationships between people. Another note about this Torah portion is that there's no story in this Torah portion. It's not a narrative. You'll hear that each student section has laws and rules that they're discussing. So there aren't characters, there's no plot, but each section that they're speaking about relates back to this larger theme of living a holy life in relationship with whatever we imagine is larger than ourselves. We might call that God. We might have other words for that experience. So the method of interpretation that the students have been exploring as they've written their Divrei Torah, their Torah teaching, is called Pardes. And this is an acronym. And so each of these Hebrew letters stands for a word, but the whole thing makes a word. The word Pardes may sound to you like the word paradise, right? It's the word for orchard in Hebrew. And this is the rabbinic method of interpreting a text. They imagine that interpreting the Torah is like entering a beautiful garden or an orchard and making your way deeper and deeper into it until you reach a hidden message at the center. Or perhaps you meet God at the center. That's one way of thinking about it. So they've been exploring their Torah portion through this method of Pardes. The pei in Pardes is the pshat, the simple meaning. So just like on the most surface level, what do my verses say? The resh stands for remez. What are the hints and questions that arise once I start thinking about and sitting with this text? The daled is for drash. You may have heard that word, or midrash you may have heard, right? Which means interpretation. So you have your questions, and then you kind of figure out, well, what do I think the answers are to my questions? That's drash. And then the samach stands for sod, which are the secrets and the mysteries. It's a more Kabbalistic, mystical way of understanding the text. So each student here has made their own journey to the center of the Pardes, the garden of their particular excerpt of the Torah portion. They each discovered their own questions, developed their own interpretations, and they each found their own message to share with us today about how the text applies to their lives, to the world. And remembering that these students are middle school students, so that is their world a lot of the time, but also much bigger than that, right? So you'll hear a little bit about middle school today. Not a surprise. Also, I want to say, so all kinds of topics related to the breadth of human experience show up in this Torah portion. And these students did an amazing job finding the themes that spoke most powerfully to them. As Ira Glass often warns us on the radio program This American Life, in this segment, you'll notice that our final Devar Torah in the lineup even acknowledges the existence of sex. So I thought I'd prepare you for that. Another thing I will say makes this experience of a group experience different from an individual bar, bat, or bet mitzvah is that we have a group, right? We're going to be hearing each student go one by one sharing their teaching. And as a community that works on mindfulness practice, I want to introduce this concept of the comparing mind and invite us into cultivating awareness of this thing that our brains do, right? It will often happen, right, that when we hear one person after another in a group speak, we might notice that we're comparing one kid to the other, right? Or maybe making judgments about, well, this one is longer than that one, or this one is shorter than that one, or this person's talking this way and this person's talking that way, right? It's a normal thing that our minds do. So I want to encourage you to just notice when the mind does that, and then just let it go. Just let it go. Let the comparing go. And practice being with and appreciating each student as they are, with their own voice, their own style, and their own approach. Some are more scholarly, others are more philosophical, others are more practical. Some divrei Torah are longer, some are shorter. We are so proud of every single one of these students and all of the hard work that they put into these pieces. So we'll enjoy them each on their own terms as we travel into the Pardes with them today. And one very last thing is we are not here for a performance or lectures. This is a holy time together of learning Torah. And in Jewish holy space, we don't applaud after a Devar Torah. But what we do is we shout with gusto, Yasher Koach. So try that for me. Great. Okay, that means beautiful job. It means go on ahead with strength. So that's what we will be encouraging you to do after we hear each student. And we're going to invite our first student forward now, Jonathan Walpert. It's in here.
Yeah. My Torah portion is about some of the commandments that God gave to Moses. On the surface, they don't seem to have much in common. First, God tells Moses to explain to the Israelites that they are holy because Adonai is holy. God also says to respect your parental figures. Then God says not to work on the Sabbath. For context, a Sabbath is the time period between Friday night and Saturday night where you don't work, at least for Jews. In addition to that, Adonai also says that they are a God. God makes it very clear that you should not worship false gods or make idols. My section ends with God repeating that Adonai is our God. Now that we understand what my Torah portion is, let's talk about these commandments and what they have in common and why they matter. In understanding this, one important question to ask is, how does a person become holy? According to my Torah portion, a person becomes holy by following the commandments. Some of the commandments are about how humans treat each other, and some are rituals which God wants us to do. An example of this is how respecting your parents is an ethical commandment. However, resting on the Sabbath is ritualistic and, in my opinion, not necessary to be a good person. I think that the ethical commandments are important, but the commandments about ritual are a single way of expressing gratitude that can be expressed in nearly infinite ways. I think that the way to be holy is to be grateful for your own existence. I don't think God needs you to pray in order to know that you're grateful. You can show your gratitude by living your life to the fullest and helping others as best you can. As Rabbi G and I discussed, a true God wouldn't require you to be a particular religion or pray in a certain way in order to be holy. If God makes humans so complex, something that can be this beautiful, then wouldn't God expect humans to express that gratitude or holiness in a variety of ways? Another question to consider is what happens to someone when they become holy and what changes in them. For some people, ritual makes them feel others. For others, it helps calm them down. Some people don't get much meaning out of it all. Everyone is different, and it varies from person to person. Everyone feels different about what gives Judaism meaning and how they approach holiness. For me personally, I don't find the ritual that interesting. When I see someone that's homeless, that's suffering, and unemployed, first I feel pity for them. Then, when I actually think about how they must feel, I empathize with them. I want to help them, and then I want to help them. In my opinion, when you become holy through helping others, you develop a sense of accomplishment. To truly help others, you have to be able to put yourself in their shoes and understand what they might need. To try to look at and understand a person that way is probably the closest we'll get to seeing a person the way God sees a person. My final question is, does what God considers unholy change over time as human cultures and standards change? Human culture and standards have changed a lot since God spoke to Moses. By extension, what God considers unholy must also have changed. God gave us free will and would likely have anticipated that we would interpret the Torah in different ways as society changes. Over time, people's interpretation of the commandments have changed, and these interpretations have filled many books, such as the Mishnah, Midrash, and the Talmud. I would like to share my interpretation of one of the commandments in my portion and how it relates to us now. The commandment says not to worship idols. At the time when God spoke to Moses, an idol was a being or object that the Israelites worshipped in place of God, like the golden calf. I see an idol today as something that distracts us from God. Some good examples are money and power. Worshipping these things, whether we know it or not, can lead us to betray our ideals and give up the things we care about. As I close, reflect on yourself and what you do in your day-to-day life. Do you experience holiness in Judaism, other faiths, or other aspects of your life? Whether you're religious or not, how do you want to bring holiness into the world and make it a better place?
Yasher Koach. It's wonderful. All right. Can we turn the volume up? We're going to try our best. Clarabelle Friedlander is next.
Every summer, I go away to a camp whose entire mission is caring for the earth. The camp does a lot of farming, and at the end of each 3-week session, campers come together for a large harvest. In that harvest, we do things like make butter, pick potatoes, harvest cabbage, and so much more. We don't do these things alone, though. We do them with our friends. This has given me a true appreciation for not only farming and gardening, but for farming within a community. In verses 9 to 10 of Parshat Kedoshim, we read, "When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall not pick your vineyard bare, or gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am Adonai, your God." I interpreted this to mean that we must leave food for the poor and the wanderer, and also that we should only take what is necessary for ourselves. Abundance is a gift to be shared. What struck me as odd about this parsha was the fact about leaving the corners of your fields untouched. I didn't feel like it translated to modern day. In our modern day agriculture, we tend to harvest everything on the farm because we view abundance as a thing that shouldn't be wasted, and we want to make the most profit as well. While there was also probably more abundance back in biblical times when there was less people and more land, people were less concerned with reaping all they could. There also aren't as many wanderers as there used to be, because in general, today there is more settlement and less wandering among peoples, along with the fact that many people can get their produce from their local farmers markets or farms. Today, some people may feel that others might take advantage of something like free food, but the point of this parsha is that there is enough. In my Torah portion, the word peah comes up a lot, which means the corners of your fields, as well as the mitzvah, the commandment, to leave the corners of your fields unharvested. Peah is a type of generosity. While today we may not practice generosity in the exact way it is described in the Torah, we can take lessons from these practices and apply them to our world today. To me, this Torah portion is about having respect for not only people, but for the earth. When we don't practice generosity and care for the earth, we start to take what the earth has given us for granted and pollute the earth. We clearly see this when we take the natural oils the earth has given us and pollute it into our water and air. As a result, we are experiencing the harmful effects of climate change. The practice of peah calls on us to respect the earth's abundance. The earth itself is trying to teach us this. So are we listening? In her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Wall Kimmer writes about respecting each other and the earth, and finding lessons the earth teaches. In one chapter, she writes about picking strawberries from bushes in the backyard and making them into strawberry shortcakes for her father. This is different from how at her neighbor's farm they pick the strawberries to sell, but in her backyard it's for her enjoyment. She writes, "Gifts from the earth or from each other establish a particular relationship, an obligation of sorts to give, to receive, and to reciprocate. Like in the Parsha, Walt Kimmer describes our obligation and our job to provide and care for others, and in return, they will care for us. When we used to leave the corners of our fields untouched, we were leaving room for the stranger to pick from our gardens and let the earth grow once more. In my own life, I feel as though we can all see simple acts of generosity that remind us of goodness. We learn that we don't always need to be consumers to be generous. I often knit or crochet things for my friends as a gift to them. It feels nice when others make something, when you feel like they took time to create something special instead of just buying it. Sometimes the best gifts come from the earth instead of the mall. For example, for my 11th birthday, my friend, instead of buying me something, painted rocks and put them in a bag for me, each rock with a different design. I liked these so much that I ended up carrying the rocks around in my bag for a year. One day my mother found them and was like, "You literally have rocks in your bag." The rocks felt like a nice gesture. It was meaningful. The rocks were a symbol of caring, of friendship and community. They meant that someone had taken the time to do something for me. Looking back, I recognize how easy it is to buy something from Amazon or Sephora instead of making something heartfelt yourself. Don't get me wrong, I love Sephora, but it's also really sweet when someone makes something. What we give as well as what we take matters. It might sound like I'm just saying only give and don't ever take, but we do need to take, just not more than what we need. And that's the message of these verses, to take only what we need and leave enough for others. In a time when we don't leave the corners of our fields untouched, and many of us don't live on farms, how can we practice the mitzvah of peah today? Doing things like participating in Buy Nothing groups, mutual aid, food pantries, using free stores, making gifts for people, and treating others with the care and respect that we want for the earth are all examples of Peah. By doing these things, we can practice generosity and caring. We should revive Peah, and we should continue to practice Peah for 2 reasons. When we are generous, we feel good about ourselves. We feel like we positively contributed to the world. When someone is kind or generous to us, we feel like someone out there cares for us and is interested in us and our well-being. Peah plays a vital role in self-worth, along with caring for the community, and we can all explore what it means for us to practice our version of Peah today.
I'll have to shake your hand later, Clarabelle. That was excellent. Thank you. Our next of our Torah comes from Josie Goldlau.
My section of the Torah portion, verses 11 to 16, has many rules regarding ethics, morality, and honesty. It talks about doing what's right and what's holy. It has laws that state that you can't steal, lie, or judge people unfairly. It says not to insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. It also says that judges shouldn't make unjust decisions in court, and that they shouldn't show preference to the poor out of pity or partiality towards the rich. In my section of the Torah portion, a certain phrase stood out to me: "You shall fear your God." This felt different from the rest of my portion. Everything else in my portion is a don't, something you're not allowed to do, but this instead is a command, something I have to do. Usually, when you fear something, that's not a good thing, and the thing you're scared of is bad. You don't want to be afraid, but here it's a good thing to do. So why is it such a good thing to fear God? What does that even mean? Right before this, the verse states, "You shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind." And then the Torah reads, "You shall fear your God. I am Adonai." First of all, this doesn't have to literally be about blind and deaf people. It can apply more figuratively too, like someone being naive or unknowing, blind to the world. To me, this means that if you do something to cause someone who's blind to fall, or curse someone who's deaf, they may not be able to know, but you will know, and God will know, and you could be held accountable for your actions. You won't just be able to forget about what you did, because now someone else knows too. There could be direct consequences, but you also just have to live with the guilt of knowing what you did. Now, I'm not completely sure if I believe in God, but to me this means that by having someone else witness your actions, you can't just ignore what you did. You can't act like it never happened and forget about it. You're forced to sit with the fact that you did something hurtful to someone. The medieval scholar Ibn Ezra commented on this verse. "Thou shalt not curse the deaf," he wrote, "because you have the power to do so. You shall likewise not place a stumbling block in front of the blind." Ibn Ezra is saying that you shouldn't abuse your power over people who are more vulnerable than you just because you can. I think this connects to the phrase, "You shall fear your God," because by exerting power over someone just because you can, you're making yourself feel strong and powerful while punishing others or making them feel small. You're making yourself feel like a god. By fearing God, you're making yourself aware that, no, you're not God. You're a human person. You're not all-powerful. This fear of God, it can motivate you to do bad things, sure, but it can also be a motivator to do good. One example of this is in the book of Exodus, when all the midwives in Egypt are instructed by the Pharaoh to kill all Israelite boys that are born. 2 midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, fearing God, disobeyed and let the boys live. Their fear wasn't a bad thing, and it wasn't like they saved the baby boys because they were terrified of God and what he would do. It also isn't exactly the same thing as being scared of something like bugs. The Pharaoh commanded the midwives to kill the baby boys, but they didn't, even though they could have been killed for that. There were probably other midwives, too, who did obey the Pharaoh's orders, but Shiphrah and Puah chose not to kill the Israelite babies, even though they were commanded to, and even though everyone else was accepting it without questioning. They chose not to answer to the Pharaoh's commands, but instead to what they believed was right and to God. I don't think these verses just apply to things that happened thousands of years ago, though. They can also apply to things today, and even to my life. For example, one time at school we had this school spirit week, and it was dress up like a character from a book or movie day. Most people didn't really dress up, and the few who did had pretty minimal costumes. But one girl who I was sort of friends with really went all out with her costume. She had the full outfit and makeup of her character. Unfortunately, throughout the day, kids made fun of her costume and said things like, "Nice outfit," or, "I admire how bold you must be to wear something like that, even though everyone else is talking about it." These kids would tease her in large groups, while their friends laughed and while she was by herself, and she seemed really hurt. By the end of the day, most of her costume was gone. Now, I didn't go along with the teasing because I knew her, and I even tried to defend her. Later, I talked with her about it and checked in on her to see if she needed anything. We weren't close friends, but I definitely didn't want to hurt her, and I wanted to make sure she was okay. I really, really would like to think I would have done this no matter what, but the truth is, I don't know. What if I didn't like her, or if she wasn't my friend? Would I have still defended her? Or I was in an after-school thing with her, and sometimes we took the school bus home together. Would I have made fun of her if I knew I wouldn't have to face her later? Bringing this back to my section of the Torah, it says, "You shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind." If I say mean things to a deaf person or trip a blind person, they won't know it was me who did it, and while they could be really hurt or even permanently affected by the results of my action, I might not have to face any responsibility for it. It's so easy to hide behind that anonymity. If my friend wouldn't know that it was me when I made fun of her, would I have done it? Would it be easier for me to convince myself that what I did was okay because she didn't know it was me? Or if I never had to see her again, maybe it would be easier for me to forget about hurting her after a while. I probably wouldn't even face consequences for it, so why should I care? I want to think that had I been in any of these situations, I still would have done the right thing. But the truth is, it's so easy to go along with hurting someone when everyone else is doing it, especially when it feels like it won't make its way back to you. It's easy to forget that your actions matter and affect people, even if they won't necessarily affect your life. In the end, I think the phrase, "You shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind, you shall fear your God," is a reminder that the actions and decisions you make every day have an impact. They won't necessarily just fade into the background and become forgotten. Years later, the people who teased that girl in my class may have completely forgotten about that, but somewhere out there, that girl might still remember what it was like to stand out and be mocked in front of everybody. I doubt that any of the kids thought about the lasting impacts of their actions, but the hurt that they caused doesn't just go away. It will live on in that girl's memory and can and probably will continue to affect her long after that day itself. Just like how our negative actions can cause an unintended impact, our positive actions can too. Even small things you might not really think about can change someone's day for the better. A small act of kindness on a bad day is something they might remember for years afterwards. Instead of placing a stumbling block in front of the blind or cursing the deaf, we can help guide people around something that could have made them trip, or say something nice to put a smile on their face. Your actions matter more than you might think.
We're halfway through the Divrei Torah, and I just want to give everyone a chance to just cleanse your palate, shake your hands out, take a breath, wiggle, stretch, whatever you need to do. Yeah. So that we can keep receiving each student fresh. Wonderful. All right, Zeno Samsky, you're on.
For my devar, I will be speaking of an odd and confusing part of the Torah. I don't expect my interpretations of this part to necessarily be something you agree with. However, I do believe there are insights we can take from this parsha into our daily lives. In these verses, I found two seemingly contradictory passages. I wondered why these two ideas would be written so close to one another, and if they were related. In Parashat Kedoshim, verses 17 to 18, we read about not hating our kin. "You shall not hate your kinsfolk in your heart. Reprove your kin, but incur no guilt on their account. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against members of your people. Love your fellow Israelite as yourself." I agree with these lines because if we did hate our kinsfolk, wouldn't that make it impossible to even practice Judaism? We have all of our Shabbat services together. We ask questions to one another during Passover. Some of our prayers, like the Malkhut, even require us to have a minyan, a group of 10 Jewish adults. Judaism is community. Being joined together through community creates a sense of kindness and is necessary for harmony between peoples. If we are not friendly with our own people, are we friendly to anyone? In this text, kinsfolk means friends, family, or neighbors. Not being kind to our family separates us from them, and not being kind to our friends means, well, we don't have any friends. Ibn Ezra, a Torah commentator, mentioned that the Second Temple was destroyed because of hatred, proving this point even more. In our current world, we see this happening with Ukraine and Russia, as well as Israel and Gaza. These neighbors feel hatred towards each other, and that hatred fuels mass destruction, displacement, and a lot of pain. If the holiest place in Judaism, the temple, was destroyed because of hating one's neighbor, shouldn't we have learned not to hate our neighbors? But then the parsha moves on to what seems like another subject entirely. God asks us not to separate certain materials and things. For example, they say, "You shall not let your cattle mate with a different kind. You shall not sow your field with 2 kinds of seed. You shall not put cloth on from a mixture of 2 kinds of material." On the surface, all of this seems unnecessary and somewhat annoying. One would always have to check if their seeds were planted correctly and if they were wearing clothes of one fabric. Most of this is obsolete now, where we have clothes a certain percent this and another that. Also, if we have smaller fields, they might be planted with multiple things we want to harvest. Originally, I was, and still somewhat am, confused about whether cattle mating with a different kind means cows and pigs, or cows and another breed of cow. Depending on what was intended, this could be incredibly reasonable or just another quirk of the Torah. These mitzvot fall into a group of laws called chok, which are essentially laws that cannot be explained. However, we are free to speculate over them. Therefore, I ask the question, why would God want us to separate these things that seem to go so easily together? I have a few ideas for this. For one, it could all just be to please God. It could also be God not wanting us to create new things. If we mixed wool and cotton, it could create something new, something God might not have planned for, and something they might not want. It could also be something to separate normal people from priests or others of high authority. Maimonides notes that priests were allowed to break the law about clothing, which may give them a higher status, because they can do things not everyone can do. Regardless of the reason, which we may never know, this, not mixing things, is the commandment. So how does it all relate? We're given 2 almost opposite things, yet there must be some connection, given they're being grouped together very closely in this passage. First, we are told not to hate others, then we are told not to mix things. What does not mixing things have to do with hatred? Not mixing things almost seems like hating things, which we are told not to do. For example, segregation, where people are separated and told they have different value as a person, and different rights based off their race, which is very similar to this situation. Segregation has happened when one group of people hates another group. This connects separating things to hatred, which God tells us not to do in the very same parsha. This piece of the Torah, as most would say, contradicts itself. Within a couple of lines, we are given 2 options: separate and hate, or bring together and be kind. Now, which do we choose to follow? But what if it's not one or the other? What if we can apply separation in a way that actually helps us to not hate? In my experience, when I am angry or mad, I try to know how I am feeling and not let it become hatred. In this moment, I am separating hatred from the emotion of anger so that it doesn't consume everything. In moments of conflict with another person, I might also separate myself from that person by going to a different room momentarily so that I can control my feelings. This temporary separation can save the relationship in the future. Another example is if someone does something bad or even something we just don't like. Separation between the action and who they are as a person is important because the action might not represent them perfectly. For example, if someone goes to prison, even if they serve their time, they still can't vote afterwards. Even if that action was a one-time thing, and they are not always like that, the prison system defines them as a wrongdoer for the rest of their life. Martin Buber, a modern Jewish thinker, wrote, "Hatred remains blind by its very nature. One can only hate part of a being. If we only see part of a human, we can't judge them purely based on that. An action is not the wholeness of a person. If more people were able to apply separation in a way that creates space for kindness, our world would be a different place with a lot less hate." Using these ideas, we can become what we, as Jews, are meant to be. By connecting with friends, family, or people we don't know, we mix two threads, something the Torah would not always have us do. Yet, sometimes when we separate these two threads, it is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes we must be apart to be truly together. The sense of connectivity, even in separateness, makes Judaism as a whole holy. We are a part of the whole, and so we are a holy people. I'd like to end with a poem I wrote. The poem is meant to connect everything I've said today, especially how this sense of connectivity makes us, or Judaism, holy. Circles. We, as a mechanism, are whole, not to be left in or out. We stay in the loop of a circle. As connectivity flows, one might wonder how we continue. Mostly, we stay inside the circle, yet sometimes we stray for our and others' benefit. One might think how circles can become spheres. Spheres are whole, and whole is holy.
Ryan Nadell, come on up.
It's truly fascinating how something as ordinary as trees is so fundamentally present in our modern day lives, while also having had such an impact on how our ancestors harvested and became closer to God. Verses 23 to 28 showcase this entirely by focusing on the agricultural rules grounded in generations of farming and harvesting. My Torah portion brings up questions and ideas that connect back to additional parts of the Torah. Verses 23 to 25 are essential agricultural rules set by God. First, you must wait 3 years before harvesting from your trees. In the 4th year, you may harvest it, but only to put in front of God for jubilation. Finally, in the last year, you may harvest your fruit and all future crops from your trees for years to come. I had several questions while going over and reading my portion. Is the tree like a human? Why must we wait so long? Why do we have to give the first harvest to God? How does this connect to the real world and other parts of the Torah, and what can we learn from it? Is the tree like a human? On the surface, no. A tree takes almost nothing after human beings like us. But underneath, yes, a tree matures just like how a human does. At the start of a tree's lifetime, it's still a sprout. It's not strong, it can't cultivate things or give its energy to anything else. Once it's grown, it's the opposite. It's strong and is able to use its energy to reproduce and make fruits just as a human would. Immediately, I saw a connection between a tree and the story of Adam and Eve. When Eve takes upon the challenge of going against God's rules and eating from the tree of knowledge, Eve's mindset changes and matures, just as a tree would. She grows stronger psychologically and doesn't fear death or the repercussions from eating from the tree. She realizes how the possibility of wisdom outweighs fear and builds up the courage to eat from the tree. She grows stronger, wiser, and understands the consequences of her actions and matures just as a tree would. Why must we wait so long? Other than the fact that waiting for your tree to fully grow is a basic agricultural rule that most people follow to achieve edible fruits and vegetables, it's almost a test to see if you would follow God's rules even if they're inconvenient to you. As humans, we usually want to take the easy way out, even if it doesn't give us the best results. By making us wait longer than we usually would, God is seeing how devoted we are to Him and Judaism. Additionally, if other people practice similar ideas, planting the fruit and waiting a good amount of time, it proves that God is correct about how agriculture works and how to get the best results through farming. In verse 24, the Torah states, All fruit shall be set aside for jubilation in front of God. Why do we have to set aside the first harvest for God? In my research, I learned that you should prune a fruit trees if it's possibly weighing down the branches or not growing well. Additionally, the fruit from the first harvest is usually of lower quality. So by giving the first round of fruit to God, he's helping his people by giving them the fruit of the higher quality. Alternatively, by giving God the first round of fruit, you show your respect to him, since usually giving someone the first plate or taste of food shows your respect and hospitality towards them. Connecting these two ideas together, by giving the first harvest to God, this encourages the future success of the fruit and later harvest, while also honoring and appreciating God who made the trees. Finally, how does this connect to our everyday lives? Circling back to my original point of how the tree is like a human, the tree almost represents society. Just like how a society as a whole changes and matures to understand things, to put a grasp on the world, and to figure out how to live life when the world isn't looking the best, a tree does the same. A tree would adapt to a new climate that it's put in. If a tree was placed in the desert, it will learn to thrive in that new environment and make sure to protect itself from anything new that comes at it. Additionally, my Torah portion instructs us to protect trees and the environment, just as people in society take action to protect our trees and other forms of nature. People who protest, set up fundraisers, and advocate for stopping climate change help protect the earth. If you harvest from your fruit from a tree too early, it can harm the tree because it makes the tree have to focus on producing more fruit instead of growing stronger, which in the long term is bad for the tree. God is like those people. By putting those rules in the most holy book, he makes sure that everyone must obey them and in the long term protect the trees. Throughout my time researching and going deeper into my Torah portion, I learned how the protection of trees has been viewed so important that it was put in the holiest book of Judaism. I learned how people can care more about nature than they might put on, and how important it is to protect trees and other forms of nature as they are essential to us. They give us food, air, paper, shelter for animals like birds and squirrels, and give us the building blocks for the homes we live in now. Like Eve, who ate the fruit and was later exiled from the Garden of Eden and had to live with the consequences of her actions, it might be tempting to pick the fruit too early. But by doing this, we don't see the long-term effects of our actions. We don't see that it will, in the long term, hurt the tree and ultimately us. Therefore, we should act on them. Therefore, we should slow down and process our words, thoughts, choices before we act on them, and make sure to understand the possible long-term effects of what we are about to do.
I just actually pruned some trees. I was just realizing, I was influenced by this one. All right, our final Devar Torah comes from Dahlia McWhorter. Come on up.
My part of our Torah portion varies a lot throughout my 5 verses. My first verse says not to let your daughter become a harlot, or the land will be degraded into harlotry, while the second is about practicing Shabbat and keeping the sanctuary a holy place. It also commands us not to talk about ghosts or hold seances because the impurity related to death will rub off on us and make us unable to communicate with God. Then it says to be respectful towards old people and fear God because he is Adonai, our God, which he reminds us of many times. If someone is living with you temporarily, be kind to them and love them as you love yourself, and the same goes with strangers. Treat them with respect, for we were slaves in Egypt and not treated with said respect. I thought the most interesting part of this was the first line, which directly translates to, "You shall not defile your daughter by making her a harlot, lest the land fall into harlotry and the land be filled with harlotry." This raised many questions for me, but I decided to focus on 2 of them. Why do we not care about the sons falling into harlotry because they're the ones with the power to impregnate? And how can the land be defiled into harlotry, and why would it matter if it did? Before we go any further, it's important to understand the Torah isn't really talking about prostitution in the way we understand it today. It's saying that a father shouldn't allow his daughter to have an illegitimate or incestuous relationship, which obviously means don't date your family members. One of the examples the Talmud brings is that you also shouldn't be in a relationship with, say, your mother's sister's ex-husband, or something like that. The word harlot isn't only about prostitution, but any illegitimate relationship that a woman might have with a man. A father is supposed to make sure the daughter doesn't have an illegitimate child. A legitimate child comes from a married couple that decided to have a baby and not from a girl who went and slept with a random man. Therefore, the verse is about not allowing your daughter to have an illegitimate relationship. This is said to be the father's responsibility because the Torah is patriarchal, which basically means that it's sexist. Daughters were seen as their father's responsibilities and properties, and wives were as well. This basically means that if a man allows his daughter to be in an illegitimate relationship, it impacts him directly in terms of his role building a quote-unquote legitimate family. So far we know that the Torah only seems to care about the daughters not being harlots. This raises the question, why do we not care about the sons going on a spree of harlotry? The simple answer is the fact that the Torah is, as I said, sexist. The in-depth answer is that the Torah never uses the word harlot to describe a single man. In the book of Jeremiah, you can see that God does care about the sons and their behavior, but only when they're included in all the Israelites, not individually. God doesn't want any of the Israelites to be whoring with other gods, and wants them to keep worshiping him and only him. So all the Israelites are seen as harlots if they cheat on God by worshiping other gods from other cultures or religions. I conclude that sometimes sons can break the patriarchal rules when they and the whole community whore after other gods, but the sons are never addressed as harlots individually. On the other hand, daughters are harlots simply by being harlots. My second question is, how can the land be defiled by harlotry, and why does that matter? This goes back to being disloyal to God. The medieval Jewish commentator Rashi interprets the Torah as saying, if you are disloyal to God, then your land will be disloyal to you. Rashi interprets this creatively and says that your land will become infertile, and the crops you plant will grow somewhere else, not where you planted them. I think this is a nice analogy that may discourage people from being disloyal to God by threatening their crops. And mind you, this is said in a time where people really did rely on their crops and farms to survive. But it's not very realistic in the sense that if you plant something, it isn't just going to grow somewhere else to spite you. In conclusion, in the Torah, being a harlot is often used as an analogy for worshiping other gods you aren't supposed to. Cheating on your husband results in having illegitimate children, just like cheating on God results on your farmland betraying you. My first question about why the Torah doesn't care about the sons and being harlots made me think about how sexist the world still is and can be today. Women have come a long way from when they were expected to stay home and cook and clean all day for their whole lives and when we weren't allowed to vote. But there still is a lot of discrimination against women in current times, even though a woman is capable of doing anything that a man can. In America, the average woman makes 84 cents for every dollar that a man makes by doing the same amount of work and maybe working twice as hard. This says to me that our society still can disregard women. It bothers me that the woman is always blamed. Don't let your daughter become a harlot instead of don't let your child become a harlot. Simply because of their genitalia, daughters were seen in the Torah as their father's property and responsibility, and not as their own people. Sexism may be the stupidest way that we discriminate. I don't like the sexism here, but maybe there's a lesson to be learned about protecting your kid from a toxic relationship or being in a situation where they have a child with someone who doesn't want a child or to take responsibility for this kid. If we're trying to protect our children from toxicity and hard times, it's okay, but we do need to worry about our sons too. Maybe the land being filled with harlotry isn't about the land at all. It's about the person making the land uninhabitable. This may sound a little dramatic, but if you're not wanted in a place because you're being toxic and annoying, that won't make the land uninhabitable, but if you're hard to be around, then people won't want to be around you. It's possible that no one will want to talk to you if you're stirring up unnecessary drama. Toxic people will tend to not be toxic to your face. I can only think of the scene in the movie Mean Girls where Regina compliments a girl's skirt and then she walks away and says, "That's the ugliest effing skirt I've ever seen." Toxic people will pretend to be nice and then go behind your back to talk about you. It would spread, making the people and the space feel anxious. An anxious space could technically be uninhabitable. People like to stab each other in the back, especially girls. I say this as a girl who is currently in middle school. Obviously, it's not everybody, but people are mean, and that can be just a fact. Mean girls will get close to you to learn your secrets, then use that information to push you down later. Maybe to use it against you to make guys not want you as you grow up. At my school, people are mean and usually don't mean it, but some drama and toxicity is real and can dissolve into real hatred that keeps coming around. So, harlotry in the text can be related to disloyalty among girls, not always in a relationship, but among friendships too. Earlier I mentioned Jeremiah, who said harlotry is about disloyalty to God as well as other people, and this disloyalty makes a toxic environment. Middle schools can be toxic places. Maybe if we cleared up this disloyalty and toxicity, our schools would be a better fit place for learning and comfort. Disloyalty is bad because the act of being disloyal can lead to drama, and drama can hurt friendships in bad ways. It may seem minor on a big scale, but it's important on a smaller scale because we don't want to make a place uncomfortable for everybody.
So in a moment, we'll take a little break. We don't want you to stray from your seats because we don't have time for like a full intermission, but I, in a moment, do want to give you a chance to just stretch, breathe, move around. The students will come up on the bima. But before that, I'd like all of our students to stand up and turn around to the congregation so we can just give you one more big Yasher Koach, because that was amazing. Yasher Koach, everybody. Yeah, okay, you can clap. Go ahead, it's fine. So we'll sing a little nigun while you can stand up, stretch, and the students will come up here, and we'll move into the mitzvah project presentation. Am I the only one in here who's feeling kind of hot? I'm wondering if we could do something about that. Thank you so much, Autumn. Okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm Marina. I'm the Director of Education at Malkhut. And it's been such a lovely time this past 2 years, actually more, getting to know these students and see what they are capable of. So I'm introducing a little bit about their social justice journey during their Olim program these 2 years. The social justice program starts off with the students really thinking about their own personal interests and cares in the world. They interrogate what they care about. What are their skill sets? How can they make the world a better place on their own with their community? And so last year, they embarked on mitzvah projects to make the world a better place through direct service action. You know, getting in there, interacting with the people in their communities, gathering materials to help people in need, all in the name of direct service. Mitzvah, we are celebrating B Mitzvah today and next week. These students are becoming sons and daughters and children of the mitzvot and the commandments that God has laid out, commandments that are both ritual commandments and commandments that are interpersonal. I think one of the students mentioned that a little bit earlier today. And so in our social justice curriculum, they start with that interaction of direct service, and then later we're going to hear about advocacy work and systemic work. But I'm going to start off by calling on the first student, Dahlia, to talk to us about what you did.
When people are is this on? When people are hungry, their pets are hungry. My bat mitzvah project was to help feed people's pets. I collected dog and cat food by sending out emails in the Jackson Heights group and asking our friends and family for money or donations. We were given many donations and even money to buy the pet food ourselves. We then emailed the Lion's Share Food Pantry asking if I could give out the food at one of their giveaways, and they said yes. One Saturday morning, we lugged all the food that we collected, and it was a lot, to where the food pantry sets up, and we set up our table. We gave away the food, and it was almost all taken. We only saved a few cat treats for my cat, Gracie, but otherwise, everything was gone.
Thank you so much, Dahlia. Great picture.
I hate this picture.
Next up is Raya in a similar area of interest.
For my mitzvah project, I collected linens and made pet beds to donate to animal shelters around New York City. More specifically, I collected donations of used sheets, towels, and linens from the people in Malkhut and Jackson Heights, which I then donated to the ACC shelters in Manhattan and Queens. I also used these donations to make 20 pet beds for the animals of these shelters. These beds were made from pillowcases and stuffed with batting, sewn and quilted with a sewing machine. By donating linens and creating beds for these shelters, I was able to help directly improve the lives of these animals and also help the ACC shelters get the things they need to help animals in need.
Thank you. And I think that image of the pillowcases and the fabric, it's like a superhero for the cats. Next is Zeno, and I hope he doesn't make you too hungry, but we will have food later.
For my mitzvah project, I've been baking challah in an effort to give everyone a bit of sweetness in their lives. Almost from the start, I knew I wanted to do something to combat food insecurity. I also knew that I wanted to do something connected to my Jewishness. I then realized, what do Jews eat a lot of? And it was bread. Rugelach, babka, matzah, pumpernickel, rye, sufganiyot, bagels, and of course, challah. That's what I wanted to do. So I did some research, and I learned about a bunch of different organizations, such as City Harvest and Community Loaves, and how they were fighting food insecurity. I learned that food insecurity is a part of poor people staying poor, or the poverty cycle, and especially how food insecurity was prevalent during COVID-19. I saw a video where a leader in domestic hunger mentioned something like, while service work like food drives, soup kitchens, and food pantries help, they won't end hunger. While he wasn't wrong, and I agreed with his speech, I felt discouraged by this. My thinking is that if people have easier ways to access their necessities, then at some point they will be able to support themselves. I believe we as individuals can make a change. Now, all I needed was a way to make my plan work, my plan to make a baking bread to donate. So I was very pleased when I remembered the Connected Chef, a nonprofit right here in Queens with a goal to distribute groceries to food insecure families. The Connected Chef packs boxes full of fresh ingredients and sends them to food insecure families for prices typically lower than the average market. The person buying the box decides the price based off their self-reported household income. So I decided to organize a meeting. I met with Kim Kalikyo, the Connected Chef's founder and director. She gave me great advice on how to ensure kitchen safety and suggested putting the challah in loaf pans to make it practical for different meals and recipes. In addition to packing boxes for them, I've baked nearly 3 dozen loaves so far, and more are coming. I hope to create a program where anyone in Malkhut can bake bread to be distributed. This way the donations keep coming, and we'll be able to provide homemade challah to all of the families who get the boxes. If you are a part of Malkhut, keep your eye on the weekly emails, as this will be coming as soon as possible.
Thank you. And I remember last year when he was halfway through this, we taste tested some of the challahs, and they were good. Okay, next up is Josie. Come on up.
For my mitzvah project, I've been working to take care of public green spaces in Jackson Heights. Something I learned while doing research for my mitzvah project is that Jackson Heights has the least amount of parks of almost any neighborhood in New York City. Sure, there's Travers Park and the Open Street, which are both great, but other than that, there's not much else. Since this is the case and building a new park would be really hard, expensive, and would take a really long time, it's so important that we make the most of the green space we already have and keep them thriving and garbage-free. So far, I've helped with cleaning up and replanting tree and flower beds on 37th Avenue. I've also helped take care of and garden the Leverett Street Community Garden. I spent several Saturdays volunteering with the Jackson Heights Beautification Group, or the JHBG, and volunteering with community organizer Nuala O'Doherty Naranjo. The JHBG is an organization dedicated to making Jackson Heights greener, cleaner, and welcoming to all. Nuala is an amazing person in the Jackson Heights community who runs a community-wide gardening club every weekend. She's also the co-founder of the 34th Avenue Open Street Coalition and the founder of the Jackson Heights Immigrant Center. She's really awesome. I plan to continue volunteering and gardening our neighborhood's green space even after my bat mitzvah too.
Thank you so much, Josie. And I will say with your last statement, these mitzvah projects, yes, they were started 2 years ago. Yes, everyone is talking about it now 2 years later, but we do hope that these continue to go on and we can reap the rewards every spring and summer with the beautiful flowers. So next is Clarabelle.
In early September of my 7th grade year, I began my social justice project, collecting supplies for babies ages 5 and under to donate to migrants in Queens in need of supplies. I had noticed how when immigrants were coming to New York from Mexico and Central America, that many of them had young children. I also realized that baby supplies are expensive and many migrants are coming to the U.S. with little to no money. When I started collecting donations, my lovely mother would drive me to people's homes to pick up collections of diapers and formulas and whatnot. This whole process went on for about a year, and at the end, I met up with a woman, who also happened to be Nuala, who collects donations to give to migrants and teaches some migrants English, and I gave her my collection. Through this process, not only did I work hard getting in touch with people organizing the donation delivery, I also learned satisfaction, especially satisfaction in helping others.
Thank you so much, Clarabelle. And last but not least, Jonathan.
My mitzvah project, is this on? Okay. Okay. My mitzvah project focused on housing insecurity. Housing insecurity is important to me because I see people who don't have housing so frequently, and it's a constant reminder of the economic disparities in our city and world. For my project, I asked people to support Housing Justice for All's campaign for good cause eviction protection by signing a petition to ask our local officials to get the bill passed. I am happy that it was passed, but it was passed in a very weakened form, so there's a lot of work that still has to be done. You can learn more at Housing Justice for All's website.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. And I just want to conclude this section by saying mitzvah projects are not easy. There's a lot of roadblocks facing young tweens and teens trying to make a difference in their communities. And so all of the work that you've done has really shown so much effort and grit and perseverance. And I can't wait to see what's next in your individual works. So I will hand it over to you.
I actually would really like to invite up these students' teacher, C. Miranda Flack-Sermonek, who worked with them this year on this next step in their justice work. So do you want to say a few words, and then I'll say a few
Yeah, I
words?
would be happy to.
Okay, great.
Hi. So I was asked something that I learned from the students, something that I'm thinking about from our journey. So we made a couple-hour journey to Albany together to speak about issues they care about. And one of the things that I learned from the students is the power of discontentment in the face of injustice, righteous rage. And it made me think about a quote from Grace Paley, who's a Jewish activist and author of Everyday Life. And she says, "Let us go forth with rage and courage to face the world, to heal the world," something like this. And I love this quote. And it made me think about one of the days that we were together. We were thinking about our roles in a social justice movement. And the the time was moving, and it is dinner time during our 7 sessions, so short to prepare for a trip to Albany. Time goes by, no pizza. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and I can feel that the room, and I'm even tired. We're all tired. We're sick of it. So the most beautiful thing that the students did during this moment, and like the moment that I remember, is they talked about what it would mean if they had sushi during the next session. Not plain pizza. Delicious vegetarian sushi. And so they conspired, and I texted Marina, and what do you know? This discontentment, this fear of not being taken care of, resulted in a really lovely sushi meal that we got to all enjoy together. And so what am I trying to say here? I think it's these everyday moments of advocacy in our lives, in our social lives, that can be most teaching and supportive of our growth. And our growth together. That was a collective moment that you all created. And I think that you'll see in these speeches also discontentment. The way that our state government functions, it's not always for us. And in the face of individuals and systems that aren't kind to our humanity, what must we do? I think we should complain. I think we should get together and allow that discontentment to produce something, like a sushi meal or a beautiful speech that you'll hear about what's on their hearts and minds. So thank you all for teaching me that power, and I'll hand it off to Rabbi G.
That was amazing. And you can see they also did community organizing, right? Organized together to get that sushi. Yeah, and made an impact for yourselves, right? All right. So, as you heard, this year was about moving from direct service work to thinking about issues on a more systemic level and really, how the system works or doesn't work, right, for us, and how can we as citizens try to influence our policymakers and make our collective lives better. And I just want to say the first student who's going to speak is Dahlia, who exerted her own free will to decide not to go on the trip to Albany. So she'll talk about that choice as well as about an issue that she cares about, and then we'll hear from each of the other students who did come to Albany. Go ahead.
I titled this Dahlia McWhorter Albany Reflection, but it is really a lack thereof. So hello, I'm the odd one out. I did not go on the Albany trip. The reason that led this decision is that I didn't know what I was supposed to be talking about. I feel like our teachers did the best that they could to inform us, but I was completely lost on what I was supposed to say. I was never really specified what I was going to say to the legislators, and I honestly felt unprepared. This really stressed me out, and it caused me to panic and procrastinate and just not want to come. Although I didn't go on the Albany trip to talk about housing in New York or people selling things on Roosevelt Avenue, there are issues that are important to me. An issue that means a lot to me is mental health awareness. Passing Daniel's Law would help with this issue. Daniel's Law is a bill introduced to the New York Assembly and Senate named after a man named Daniel Prude. Daniel is having a mental health crisis and was killed by the police. Daniel's Law says that mental health crises should not be handled by the police and should be treated as health issues, not a public safety threat. In conclusion, I didn't go to Albany, but there are causes that are important to me. I supported this cause by sending a letter to the Senate and Assembly leaders advocating for Daniel's Law.
In March, our B Mitzvah group went to Albany. We went to learn more about how our state government works and how we can create change within that system, even when we aren't old enough to vote. We talked with state assembly members Catalina Cruz, Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, and Stephen Raga about issues we cared about. For the most part, the assembly members were all really nice and seemed happy to talk to us. In our meetings, we each got an opportunity to talk about an issue that was important to us. I talked about the severe budget cuts our libraries have undergone in the last few years. This is an issue that's really important to me because libraries are a crucial part of our community and have recently been facing severe budget cuts across the city that are causing them to limit books, programs, and the hours they offer. In these meetings, the Assembly members also explained to us how the state budget works. Sorry. Even after talking to them, I'm still not completely sure how it works, but my understanding is that the governor creates a proposed budget, which is then reviewed and revised by the state Senate and Assembly. Then the Senate and Assembly each separately create their own budgets that they want enacted. Finally, negotiations occur between the governor, the Senate, and the Assembly, and they just battle it out with the 3 different budgets until hopefully all of them are slightly happy. So this bargaining and negotiating takes weeks and involves a lot of back and forth between the governor and the legislature. If the deadline for the budget comes up and the budget is still being negotiated, the negotiating continues, and none of the state legislators get paid during this time. Sometimes this period of negotiations can last up to months, all the while the governor still gets paid. Meeting some of our state assembly members was awesome, but to me, the coolest part of the trip was getting to meet all the other people who had come to the state assembly that day to lobby politicians. Some were people who came every week to talk about what they cared about. It was so cool to meet people who had taken time out of their days and weeks to speak up. It was so cool to meet people who had taken time out of their days to speak up for their rights and what they cared about. We even saw some other kids there. Even if I didn't necessarily agree with all of them, it was so amazing to see all the different issues that mattered to people and what they were trying to do to get them fixed. Everyone we talked to was also so friendly and excited to talk to us. They wanted to hear what we were in Albany for, too. There were people lobbying for disability rights, for better health care for people with chronic health conditions, and so much more. I feel like I learned a lot on our trip to Albany. It was really cool to learn about how our state government works and get to meet the politicians who represent us, and it was so inspiring to meet other people like us, making sure their voices were heard.
In preparation for our trip to Albany, I researched bills and wrote out a document to present to our representatives about my chosen bill, A6388. This bill makes it so there needs to be someone who specializes in animals to help design shelters for temporary housing in the case of a natural disaster like floods or fires. Although our trip wasn't bad, my expectations weren't completely met. While I learned a lot about how the state government functions, unfortunately, I also learned about the flaws in our government, like how sometimes bills are passed because they can create more money for the state instead of bills that actually help the people. Additionally, I observed some flaws in our representatives, mainly how some of them didn't seem to care about our ideas and left me in particular feeling unheard and lacking in feedback from them. Other than that, our trip went well, with others legislators supporting our ideas, engaging us by teaching us more about how our state government works, and giving us suggestions on how to turn our ideas into reality. Specifically, Assembly member Stephen Raga told me that I could send him an email to make a bill proposing a state cap for New York in my name. He expressed interest in my ideas in the bill I proposed. Traveling to Albany was fun. Hanging out with my friends and learning about the other issues that people were fighting for was interesting and engaging. The architecture in the Capitol building was impressive, and it was very fun to observe other organizations and the people who were there to advocate for their causes. At the end of the trip, we got to go to the House floor and got a shout out from Stephen Raga and Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, which made me, in particular, feel like what we had done would hopefully create long-lasting change and help others accomplish the same things.
It's fine. When I first arrived in Albany, I was excited, but I didn't expect anything life-changing and exceptional. I chose to watch people instead. I watched the way that people interacted with each other in the building. Everyone was on their phones, minding their own business. The Congress people seemed so busy, like they always had so much to do. I watched how some of them chose to multitask well with us, and some chose to fully involve themselves in us. I noticed the building too, how the first floor was a pretty white marble, and the higher floors were gray corporate office spaces. I watched how my friends interacted with everything. I watched everything. For example, when we were with one of the representatives, we began to present on our projects, and she only seemed interested in mine. It's not that my peers didn't have anything interesting to say as well, it's that she unfairly distributed her time between our projects and seemed generally uninterested in other projects. It interested me that she was so bluntly disrespectful. I don't know why what fascinated me from Albany was the way people acted, but I think it's because I'm a watcher. I love talking. I'm a yapper, it's true. But first and foremost, I love watching people. My mom has always loved watching people, and I've done that with her. When I was in Albany, what I think I loved the most was watching the Congress people interact with each other. I found it fascinating that some Congress people tried to put down their colleagues when talking about them, and some acted truly fascinated when talking to us, how some tried to act more professional and some tried to be more friendly and social. I think what I really took away from this was how, in American politics, lawmakers choose to interact with each other.
Why did we go on this trip? We wanted to advocate for issues we all cared about, issues that our assembly members in Albany can help fight against. Why was this trip meaningful? I had a lot of amazing interactions with our assembly members and with my friends. What made me proud? I'm super impressed and proud of everyone who spoke. I think we conveyed our issues wonderfully. Most of the assembly members responded in a good way, even if some were not super thoughtful with their words and how they could affect people. When the assembly members spoke, they sounded smart and knew a lot about the issues we brought to them. They also seemed to support our causes already. For those who didn't, they looked up specific bills we spoke on and asked questions. They didn't seem to find any major issues with the bills, so they said they might support them. Were there any parts I didn't like? Yes. Some members spoke harshly without considering how it would affect us, discourage us, etc. I won't say names, but some might also have been doing it for publicity. While I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing, they could have been kinder or cared more. Were there any parts I thought were really cool or I really liked? Another yes. Stephen Raga was really nice, actually staying a little long to talk to us, even though he had an important meeting. Of course, we also had fun moments as a group. On the way there and back, we had sing-alongs. I didn't participate, but it was fun anyway. Played games, and so much more. As well as that, we met new folks advocating for a variety of issues, attempting to get funding, trying to spread the word, and more. We got donuts and sandwiches during, and even Chipotle afterward. How would you sum up the trip? Overall, it was amazing. There were a lot of new experiences, and it was really fun. We got some Olim bonding time and got to advocate for the multitude of issues we care about. This trip will be one I remember for a long time, and for many reasons. I think that our assembly members will take our ideas into consideration and create change for the better. I hope that my peers agree with me and that I'm right. I am right and they do take our ideas, then the world will be a better place for everyone. Thank you, everyone who made this trip possible.
Jonathan, you're going to finish us out.
Too many papers.
Do you need help finding it?
I'm sorry. No, that's not it.
How can I help you, my friends?
No, I think I got it. It should
Here, Albany, Albany, Albany. There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Talk really loud and clear. I want people to hear what you have to say.
The Olim's trip to Albany gave me a lot of insight, but also made me grapple with some harsh realities. That day, we went to the Capitol and met with some of our representatives. I got to talk with them about issues I care about, such as the Unemployment Bridge Program. The Unemployment Bridge Program provides income replacement for workers who aren't eligible for traditional unemployment benefits. I also spoke in support of revisions to our education system to make it more friendly to families with neurodivergent kids. This could include better financial aid and a more fair system to reimburse families for high tuition that they often have to pay to help their kids get the education they need. Our representatives told us that there was not much they could do at the moment because the budget was almost finalized and it would be too difficult to make large revisions now. Even if they could, there are a lot of issues that are beyond them, and addressing them would require help from the federal government. Our local representatives can't restructure the entire education system without help from the U.S. government. I felt heard and respected, but I also felt powerless. I'd imagine that sometimes our representatives do as well. I think I'm going to have to come to terms with the fact that what is going on in the federal government is going to trickle down to the other levels of government. There's so much happening. Bad policies are being put in place, and good policies are being abolished. I will have to recognize that neither I nor our local representatives will be able to do much about it for the foreseeable future. At the same time, we also need to be proactive so that we don't let anyone else be elected who will set us back even further or make fixing all these issues harder. So we have to work on the issues that we can right now, such as organizing in our communities and working to improve people's lives at a local level. But we must also be ready for when we can make a difference on issues that we care about that happen to be on a larger scale. I've been interested in government and politics for a while. I'm glad I got to see government in action, and I am committed to continuing to help local groups fight for our neighborhood, our county, and city. I may not be ready to vote, but I am definitely ready to help.
I just want to give us a moment to take all of that in. This is a lot of work and a lot of care and a lot of heart and struggle and a lot of growth. And I don't know, I'm feeling truly, this is nothing I wrote down to say, like I'm just feeling inspired right now. I really am. I'm feeling like my heart is full. I'm feeling a sense of hope. Hope that, there's a sense that there are people who are going to keep on engaging and fighting and struggling to make this world better in the generation that's following me. But I'm not going to say what I feel like a lot of old people say. It's like, well, we screwed it all up. It's you got to fix it now. Right? No, we need to work together, all of us, right? And I think, I hope that Malkhut can continue to be a way in for all of you for organizing and building power. And I hope that what you've learned will continue to influence your choices moving forward in terms of, just how you engage with the world. And I hope that you'll engage with the world and with these issues as a Jew, among all the other identities that I know that you hold, because Judaism really does have a lot, I think, to resource us with in terms of wisdom, in terms of being able to have a long perspective, right? And with the values and the qualities that we want to bring into the world. So I'm inspired. I also just want to share one of the issues that the class learned about and talked about, and another housing issue that Jonathan spoke about in addition to the one you already talked about, which I can't remember which one you just talked about.
I talked about the first one I talked about was a bill that was passed. The second was the
Right. So the housing access voucher program is another issue I believe that you talked about. Or maybe not. Okay. Maybe the class learned about it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. You did talk about it. Okay. So the housing access voucher program, it's related to these housing issues that the students learned about. It already exists in New York City. It's a way to help folks access housing, right? Folks to not have to pay more than 30% of their income in order to access housing. The proposal from the same organization that we had up there on the screen before, from Jonathan, was to expand that to the state. And it happened. It looks like it's making it into the budget this year, but of course, as we often hear, in a much more weakened form than we asked for. Only, maybe, I think it's $50 million out of $250 million ask, but it's a foot in the door. I just wanted to share that because we do make a difference, and we are part of larger coalitions that are working on these issues from year to year, and we do make progress. So we're going to close soon. I want to thank a whole bunch of people, then we're going to close with some prayer and some singing, and then we'll get to eat. So I want to thank all the people who have made, especially this aspect of the learning, and just all the ways that you support our students and their parents, and we're going to miss Rabbi Emily Herslin for working with me to work with these students on their Divrei Torah. Each and every one just turned out so beautifully. And also to thank Emily and my husband, Jim Talbot. Where are you, Jim? Oh, he might be feeding my meter. Oh, there you are. For teaching our Olim Torah on Shabbat mornings these past few years. I want to thank C. Miranda, there you are, for guiding these students this year. Yeah, with only 7 sessions, I think you accomplished quite a lot. I want to thank all of the parents of these students for your tireless support of them, for all, I mean, it's a lot of time, and making sure that they're showing up where they need to show up, when they need to show up, with the things they need to show up with. But even more so, just for your support of Malkhut, for your support of this process, which is still quite an experiment. And thanks for shaping it with your own insights and your own amazing ideas, and your hands and your hearts. I want to thank our students for your hard work and for your commitment to this process. You've worked really hard, yeah. And I want to thank all of our Malkhut staff, so they're not all here today, but who work behind the scenes every day to support all that we do in our community, and all the volunteers who are helping out today with setting up and hosting us and cleaning up. Thank you so much. And if you want to see the students' thank yous, they are on our website. You can go and see they each have some thank yous that they are giving at this time in their lives. So I want to invite up Emily and Marina. And hey, Jim, would you come on up here too? Are there any other teachers I'm forgetting? And see, you should stand up here. Yeah. Oh, Sharon, my gosh, Sharon, come up here. No, Zeev is not here. And for those of, if you're able, please stand. And what we're going to do. Cantor Miriam. Oh my gosh, Cantor Miriam, come on up here. I don't know. If I don't write it down, I don't remember. I don't think Sophie's here today. Sophie, are you here today? Okay. Help, Cantor? Okay, beautiful. Students, come on, stand with us. So, at the end of a course of study, it's traditional to say a special Kaddish. It's called Kaddish de Rabbanan, in praise of our teachers, for our teachers. And this is not a song we sing very often at Malkhut. We didn't practice it. But I want you all up here for this moment, and Emily and I will lead all of you in it. This is a setting by the wonderful Debbie Friedman. For our teachers and their students, and the students of the students, we ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen. And for those who study Torah here and everywhere, may they be blessed with all they need, ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say, Amen. Siman tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, siman tov, siman tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, siman tov, siman tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, siman tov, yehelanu, 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 ulechol Yisrael, yehelanu, yehelanu, ulechol Yisrael, yehelanu, yehelanu, ulechol Yisrael, yehelanu, yehelanu, ulechol Yisrael. Let's say a quick motzi before you get to go eat. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min